So let's talk about a very basic and integral part of ProPresenter 7, and that is outputs. At the end of the day, you can do all you want in the software, but you have to get it somewhere. So commonly we're working with either projection, televisions, or we could also be using LED screens or anything like that. Anything you're sending a signal to is considered an output. Now, we often work in what's called resolution. Now, you might have heard me talk a little bit about this, but if you don't know too much about resolution, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what you need to know is the resolution of a screen is made up in pixels. So 1 pixel is a very tiny portion of what makes up your entire screen. Different screens have different numbers of pixels in them. But if you looked at your television, for example, in your home, there's a very good chance that it's going to be one of 2 resolutions. It's going to be what's called 1920 by 1080, or it's going to be 4K. Now, what that means is that 1920 by 1080 means your screen has 1920 pixels in one direction and 1080 pixels in another direction. So generally that is in a rectangle, which means that that is 1920 across the top and 1080 down the side. So that would make up your entire screen, and that's why we say 1920 by 1080, or you might see references in stores saying it's a 1080 screen. If you had a 4K screen, that's actually 4 times 1920 by 1080. So there's actually a lot more pixels involved there, and we would be sending the resolution that that screen wants. Now, these days, a lot of laptops have what's called 2K screens or even 4K screens. We're kind of in the middle of a market world where it's moving towards 4K as a base standard, and 8K and all those other things are kind of on the horizon and coming out. Now, a lot of cameras also record in 4K. Even your phones are now capable of recording at 4K, which is pretty incredible. So for this, we're actually going to use 1920 by 1080. It's a standard that's been around for a long time, and a lot of your larger screens still run in 1920 by 1080. Ironically, even though your phones and your laptops might run at a higher resolution. So let's jump in and we'll create an output. So we go to screens. Screens here, we go down to configure screens. So we're already down to looks. We go to configure screens. So here comes up with your screen configuration. Now don't be scared, it's very, very simple, it's very straightforward. You have one screen already created, it's called your placeholder. Now in this, placeholder means it's nothing. The screen doesn't exist, it's just there, so you don't get any errors saying there's no screens. It's something you can demo with and play with without actually having a live screen plugged into your computer. So here I can see my screen is set up to be 1920 by 1080, which is what you should have there as well. It's a single screen. So here you can change what type of screen it is. I'm just going to stay with single for now. We'll go through the rest in a sec. And that's what my screen looks like. And down here, I've got all my different options. So I've got hardware options, my output. I'm going to send it to placeholder number 1. I can add another screen. My output target is full. So I'm just going to send full screen. If I started changing these, it would actually start chopping my screen up into sections of that one screen. So I don't want a 2 by 1. I don't want a 2 by 2. I want a full screen. And here you can change the name. So we could change that to demo screen, and you would see it update. So now this is my demo screen. So this is also where you see your aspect ratio, 1.78. Doesn't really make sense. That's okay. It's actually 16 by 9. So that is your pixel ratio. So size 1920 by 1080 is actually 16 by 9 as a ratio. So here I've got my placeholder. Now if I want to add more screens, I can add more screens. I hit the plus button. Now what's going to happen, you see my demo screen, I'm already sending something to that, that's fine. What's going to happen is that you see all these different options. Now some of these are new. If you see at the top here, you'll actually see your current screens that are plugged in, or if you're using, like me, a laptop, you'll see the screen you're currently using. And the resolution of that screen is 1440 by 900. So that's my laptop screen. I can identify and it will show up like that. That's pretty cool. And you can click off it. Whoop. We won't do that. We just activated the screen. And you can click off it and it will go back to normal. So here you've got what's called NDI. Now NDI is a network protocol for sending screen or an output or a video signal across a network. This is really cool. It does require a decent network, not just your little home network. You might have some troubles, but it does require quite a significant amount of bandwidth on your network. So just be aware when you're trying to use this kind of stuff, you might run into problems if you're not sure about how your network works. So maybe just get a bit of an understanding of your network and what you're trying to achieve before you start messing around with NDI signals to start with. Here we've got Siphon. Now Siphon, the way it works is it works on the computer's graphics card that you're using, and it can send that video signal to another part of your computer. For example, if you had another bit of software open, like a capture program or something like that, you could send the output out of ProPresenter to Siphon, which physically goes nowhere except for internally in your computer onto the graphics card. And that other program could pull that out as an input into that program and see that. So while you wouldn't be physically sending it anywhere, it's actually a really cool, easy way that you could potentially, say, record an output on your computer of ProPresenter 7. It's not what I'm using here, but it could actually be used for that if you, say, want to record the lyrics output to overlay over some live cut cameras in post or something like that. There's lots of different options you can use Siphon for, and it's the same with NDI. You can do the same concept with NDI. So you've also got down here, we've got our placeholder screen. So as I said before, placeholder are basically just fake screens you can build, and then say you could build a whole show together, and when you get into the venue and plug in all your screens, you could actually just reallocate your placeholders to the correct screens in the venue. So it's a way you could set everything up, test it all before even being in the room. And that's a really cool new feature. And now down here, you've also got grouped and edge blended. Now, we're going to go into these things a little bit later. They're not stuff that you really need to know yet, but these are more advanced ways of blending screens, merging screens, using multiple screens to merge them into one giant screen in many different ways. So here, I'm just going to leave it as my placeholder. Again, as you can see, you could rename it there if you wanted to. I don't need to change that. If you've already created your screen like we have, we've got a placeholder here. We could change it here in terms of what we're using and how we do that screen. So if I went to a mirror screen, I could mirror my screen into another output. So you can see I've got my demo screen, which I've made, and I have an unconfigured screen, which is going nowhere. I could say, call that my placeholder 2. Now I've already assigned this one somewhere, which is not going anywhere at all. And I could reassign that somewhere else. So down here, you've also got your color. So if you wanted to, which I probably would advise against it before you tweak settings of your actual screen itself, you could enable this and you can mess around with colors that your output is sending to the screen. So if there's something that's just completely wrong on a projector or a LED screen or something like that, and you need to kind of color match a few different screens, you can do it here, but just be advised this is not the most optimal way to do it. The best option is always to try and do it on the device you're using. So it might be a television, it might be a projector, it might be an LED screen, whichever it is, try and get the colors correct there first before you start messing around with the software colors. So here you've also got corner pinning. What corner pinning means is you can actually grab the corners of your screen and just move them around and tweak them. So if you've got a projector that's you can't quite get right, or it's a slightly odd shape or something like that, or there's a bow or something in the screen, whatever that is, you could actually use corner pinning to just tweak the corners, move them around a little bit, and just touch up and fine tune some stuff, just in case if you've got some part of your screen that's overshooting, going where you don't want it to, things like that. So that's also there as well. So down here as well, you've got your identify screens and outputs. Now the other part we haven't shown you yet is the stage. This works exactly the same. It's your stage screen. You just send what you need to there as well, and that will work the way you need it to. So currently that's going to my placeholder 2, and I could make new placeholders if I want multiple screens. I've got my 1920 by 1080, which I've been using, and here I've got my 4K, which is 3840. So that's actually 4 times 1920. It's not actually 4000 pixels, even though a lot of people think it is. It's actually not. It's just a bit shy. It just means 4 times 1920. So that is everything for your outputs. You can turn them on and off as you choose to here. I'm going to turn my audience back on. Now the next part is my screen color. This is the last part of your output. Now my screen color is currently set to nothing, which means that if I send transparencies, it's going to send a transparency out the other end, which is what we call an alpha key, which we'll come to later. Now, if I turn this on, I'm going to send black. Now, black is probably the most basic one you want to use because all your screens are generally going to want to send black when you're not sending any content to it. However, there is a use where you could actually need to send a color to it. So we could go here and we could choose a green. Now, quite commonly, one common color you would use is called chroma key green. Now, what that means is that when nothing is going to your screen, it's going to be solid green. And that's actually what you want sometimes, because that means that you could key out aspects of your screen. Now, that happens outside of ProPresenter, but if you were asked to send a color of a screen, make it all red, make it all blue, make it all green, so that that color could be removed after the fact and you're left with just, say, some lyrics or something that are there, then that's how you would do it. You would set your screen color to whatever color you decide. As I said, green and blue are the most common things. You've probably all seen them in movies. Green and blue chroma keys are what would be in the backdrop of most sci-fi movies these days, and that's how they do it. It's the backdrop, the screen that they're in front of is all green, it's all blue, and that means it's a solid color and it just gets removed after it gets filmed. And it's the same concept that's happening here. We just remove that color after the fact and we're left with, in essence, the people standing in front of it, or for what we're doing here, the text or the pictures or the lyrics that are here on the screen left behind. And that's everything for our outputs. I hope it all makes sense. Feel free to go over this one again if you need to, and we'll kind of build on some of this lesson in further lessons as we go through and look into some of the multi-screen stuff and the edge blending and all that kind of stuff as well.